Why do you want our politicians to be able to commit crimes? That should be an embarrassing admission. But instead, we have people actually openly arguing for it now. What's happening? What's happening? I didn't plan to make this video, but there's some really important things going on right now. And you might not realize how important they are until it's too late to do anything about it. There's a really scary push to turn America into a theocracy that actually does have a viable route to success. And you may or may not realize that the recent ruling on presidential immunity has a lot to do with it, but I'll get into that a bit later. Lately, there's been a renewed push to get Christianity into the curriculum of public schools by making it a law that the Ten Commandments have to be displayed in the classroom and that the Bible has to be taught as part of American history and can even be used in other seemingly unrelated subjects like math and science. This isn't for some religious studies course, which would be fine, but it's more about an exclusive promotion of Christianity, and that in and of itself is an ulterior motive. It's part of a concerted effort to coax proponents of church-state separation into legal challenges against these new laws, which they're doing, as they've always done, and fortunately they usually win those cases because the First Amendment is quite clear. But those victories might very well be a thing of the past. That's why the people forcing publicly funded schools to promote Christianity are being especially brazen about it, because they actually want the lawsuits. They're taunting proponents of the First Amendment. They want to provoke the lawsuits, specifically so that they can be brought before the recently unbalanced Supreme Court, so that they can presumably shoot these suits down and establish a new precedent while they have the opportunity. That's not some secret conspiracy. They outright admit in public statements that's why they're doing this. They try to justify this by boldly lying to your face. Like this.
The Bible is a necessary historical document to teach our kids about the history of this country, to have a complete understanding of Western civilization, to have an understanding of the basis of our legal system, and is frankly, when we're talking about the Bible, one of the most foundational documents used for the Constitution and the birth of our country. Every teacher, every classroom in the state will have a Bible in the classroom and will be teaching from the Bible in the classroom to ensure that this historical understanding is there for every student in the state of Oklahoma in accordance with our academic standards and state law.
They say that the Bible and the Ten Commandments had substantial influence on the founding principles of our Constitution. That is a bold lie. The Constitution is perfectly antithetical to biblical law. That's one of the reasons I like it so much. You see, biblical law, like the Ten Commandments, is authority driven from the top down, supposedly from the King of Kings commanding the common people, us, we the people. The Constitution does the opposite. The Constitution is authority built from the bottom up, not the top down. It's constructed to benefit we the people, not by imposing laws upon us, but by imposing laws upon the government. The Constitution is not law restricting the people. It's law restricting the government. And unlike the Ten Commandments, the Constitution is a living document. It can be changed. Taking power from the government and giving it to the people is what's so remarkable and special about the Constitution. You see, Historically, usually when people come into power and authority, they're all about finding ways to solidify, maintain, and even grow their power and authority. But that's not what the founding fathers did. George Washington did not become a king. He became a president and then allowed a peaceful transfer of power to take place for the next president. And so that continued. All throughout the Bible, the governments are monarchies. None of them are like the United States, except, ironically, the closest comparison to it being Rome and classical antiquity. The enemies in the Bible, the pagans, which is where American inspiration actually came from. And that form of representative government, that republic, ended around the same time Christianity was beginning. And then it didn't begin to resurface again until Christianity began to finally waver with the Enlightenment thinkers who directly inspired the founding fathers. That's why the buildings of the American government look like ancient Roman buildings and not churches. That's why in Washington, D.C., you see obelisks, rotundas, and columns, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. And the Romans in the Bible are considered the bad guys. So far from being a force for a representative-style government, Christianity is actually a force against it. Because most of the governments all throughout the Bible are monarchies, that is why when they crafted the character of God, they described God as a king, because that is what they knew. Throughout the thousands of years, both during the time the Bible was written and the history that followed, people were ruled by kings. And so they also thought of God as a king with authority flowing from the top down. The United States flipped that around, turned that thinking on its head. Some of the less savvy Christian nationalists openly admit that they want to go back to a monarchy, and they think that a constitutional republic was a mistake. The more clever Christian nationalists want to do it piece by piece while lying and claiming to respect the Constitution and a representative-style government. They're the cancer that wants to become a part of the government so that they can destroy it from within. Regardless, both of these types of Christian nationalists have the same goal of converting America into something wholly un-American, while even calling themselves things like America First or the Heritage Foundation. The Ten Commandments demand that the people are not allowed to say certain things that some would consider blasphemy. And the Ten Commandments demand that people are not allowed to express themselves in certain ways that some would consider to be making graven images. The Constitution says that the people are 100% allowed to do these things, and that the government is restricted from having any power to stop them. The Ten Commandments demand that the people have to worship a particular God. And the Ten Commandments demand that the people must set aside a particular day to do so. The Constitution says that the people can worship or not worship whatever God they want on whatever day they want, or not on any day at all, and the government is absolutely restricted from having the power to make them do otherwise. The Ten Commandments demand that you respect your parents, but the Constitution protects the right of the people to disrespect their parents if they want to say whatever offensive thing they want to their parents. And if those parents are abusive, not only can they be disrespected, but the government may even empower the children of those parents to be protected from them. The Ten Commandments demand that you not covet, but the American enterprise has largely been a capitalistic endeavor, which is basically rooted in coveting. And if you disagree with that, I know we can at least agree that for better or worse, consumerism is rooted in coveting, and consumerism is a staple of the current American economy, one that has been allowed by the Constitution and even encouraged by the government. The Ten Commandments demand that you not murder and that you not steal. I believe that is what the common folk really think of when they think of the Ten Commandments. So that is why they think the commandments are good for everyone. But most people cannot recite all 10 commandments. They just know about the murdering and the stealing. But murdering and stealing are laws for the people, and the Constitution is about restrictions against the government. So the Constitution is not even where you would find laws against murdering and stealing. So tell me, what do the Ten Commandments have to do with the Constitution at all? The two documents are diametrically opposed. The Constitution restricts the governing authority from silencing the press, or stopping you from protesting, or stopping you from bearing arms, or forcing you to testify, or unreasonably searching you, or seizing your property, or inflicting cruel and unusual punishment upon you, like burning you. There are times when people of authority try to make it seem like exercising these rights is ridiculous, or even try to make it seem like you do not have these rights. Or these government officials will even sometimes talk about the Constitution as if it's not law they must abide by, but that the people must abide by them. That's false. The Ten Commandments also say not to commit adultery and not to lie. How many of these commandment-peddling politicians follow those commandments? The Constitution does not mention the Ten Commandments, the Bible, or any of its passages, Christianity, Yahweh, or Jesus at all. Now, you'd think that if those things were such an inspiration, they'd at least be mentioned. In the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson mentions nature's God, which is like the God of Spinoza. Jefferson was a deist. He created what is known as the Jefferson Bible, in which he used a razor and glue to literally cut out and delete references to Jesus' miracles and the supernatural. Does that sound like something a devout Christian would do? Jefferson respected many of the teachings of Jesus, as do I, even though I'm an atheist. But Jefferson expressed disdain toward organized religion, and especially towards religious authority, which he said abused and confused Jesus' teachings for the gain of their own power and wealth. And I, an atheist, 100% agree. That shouldn't be surprising to a Christian who is actually familiar with Jesus' teachings, because Jesus also had problems with the religious authorities of his time. Jesus was quite offensive, not to non-believers, but to believers. And as far as Jefferson goes, notice the disdain for those who seek power, the disdain for those who want to take advantage. What was said and what was done were different matters, because there was certainly hypocrisy amongst the founding fathers. They were far from perfect. Even though what they did was not always good, at least what they said was correct. At least the system they attempted to create was better, much better than what had come before, which was the actual religious monarchy. Here's the problem with listening to duplicitous politicians talk about the Constitution. It is in their corrupt interest to undermine the Constitution, because, like I said, the Constitution restricts the politician, not the people. So, of course, politicians have the motive to lie about it. The Constitution empowers the people at the expense of the politician. So when a politician purports to love the Constitution, to love the very thing that restricts them, and then they make proposals that directly undermine it, they are simultaneously virtue signaling while trying to destroy the very thing they are claiming to value as virtuous. They do that in the hopes that their typical supporters will be ignorant, and that is an increasingly viable tactic, especially if they can solidify the misconceptions they spread in the minds of school children. These politicians aren't dumb. They're evil. They crave power, and the Constitution, the people, keep them from having the power they crave. Power attracts the corrupt. So if they can establish a precedent that undermines the Constitution, then they gain more power. Religion is a cheap and easy way to obtain it, as it has always been. It can be used to gain the support of short-sighted religious people who also want more power and influence in their society. They are perfectly willing to sacrifice freedom for what they perceive will be the benefit of their ideology and the effect they think their ideology will have. They're quick to give up this freedom because to them it won't feel like a loss of freedom at all, or so they think. Because they're already a part of the religion, and so it won't be imposed upon them. The loss of freedom will only be felt by others, and it will be a loss that these short-sighted religious people either refuse to acknowledge or dismiss as inconsequential. And that is not only short-sighted, but extremely foolish. They're allowing themselves to be used like pawns by people who don't really care about them and may not even be religious. It is my belief that some of the strongest proponents of Christian nationalism aren't even Christians themselves, though they would definitely not want that to be known. And I certainly don't like the idea that some of these people are likely non-believers posing as Christians, because I certainly don't want to be associated with them as a non-believer myself. Our perception of the politician has shifted in a particularly dangerous way. Originally, it was intended as a burden of public service, something akin to jury duty. It wasn't supposed to be something you aspired to. It was supposed to be selfless. You had to be responsible and accountable to the people. You had to genuinely want to figure out ways to solve problems and get things done, not for you, but for the people. As a government official, as a representative, as a person of public service, the common citizen was supposed to be seen as above you. As the government official, you're their servant. That has shifted. No longer is politics about service. Now it's about prestige and power. Now it's a status symbol. Now it's a business maneuver. Now politics is a viable path to the fame and wealth that was once only reserved for celebrities. We've lost our way and gone so far off the path that now we just directly elect the celebrities themselves. Ronald Reagan, Jesse Ventura, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Al Franken, Donald Trump. And if a politician doesn't start as a celebrity, they can easily use social media to become one. Cults of personality, like religious figures. Idiocracy was a prophecy. This tendency to put these politicians up on pedestals has inspired people into some truly dangerous lines of thought. Regardless of whether you love Trump or hate Trump, the recent Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity should alarm and terrify you. The Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor said that it would make the president a king above the law. If anything, what's needed more now than ever before is more accountability in government, certainly not less. Now, I understand that if you like Trump, your initial reaction might be one of approval, especially if you think that he has been prosecuted unfairly, or if you like the idea of owning the libs. But put politics as team sports aside for just a moment and realize it's possible that Trump will never be president again. And even if he is, I guarantee you that eventually there will be someone in office who you do not like, and they will inherit the enormous, unfettered power you now support just because it will benefit this one guy that you do like. Don't be short-sighted. Or don't put political team sports aside and simply apply this ruling to Biden. If you think Biden should be prosecuted for anything he has done while president, well, you can forget about that now. If you hate the Democrats, okay, well, what if a Democrat gets in office one day who is very competent and fully aware that he will not be held accountable for all manner of unethical decisions made within his ever-broadening and increasingly vague official capacity as President of the United States? If you were worried about corruption before, if you think it's bad now, just wait. You haven't seen anything yet. And why is this being done now? Well, for the same exact reason they're pushing the religious laws now. They have Supreme Court favor, and as such, the ruling was divided precisely along ideological lines, 6-3. How did they get Supreme Court favor? A statistical anomaly, a death, a retirement, and some judicial appointee delaying tactics that helped open up a full third of the seats during the one term of the guy who now gets to reap the benefits of a branch of government that was always meant to be a part of a system of checks and balances, and especially a part that was supposed to be politically impartial. Now, unlike a religious hierarchy where power is centralized above the people, our government was designed to be able to stop itself from being tyrannical. The branches are meant to hold separate power and authority over each other in a way that authority is never centralized and dictatorial. That's changing. Qualified immunity. We investigated ourselves and found that we committed no wrongdoing. That was always bad, but that has now devolved into something even worse. That there doesn't even need to be an investigation, because even if there was wrongdoing, it doesn't matter and cannot be acted upon anyway. Because we don't want our politicians to be afraid of doing things that would put any one of us regular people behind bars. That's not the standard of an ethical society, but that's the standard now. The next stage after that is just blatant tyranny without the facade, destroying America under the battle cry that you're saving America. Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, which created Project 2025 and who strongly supports the Supreme Court ruling, said that it will ensure that the president won't have to second guess, triple guess every decision they're making. Okay. And why is that the case? Well, because the president won't have the fear of legal repercussions. In such a consequential job, where life and death is often on the line, where lives can be affected for decades to come, you should be second-guessing and triple-guessing every decision you make. You should be in constant fear of the people, of justice. We should be outraged that the government is trying to find ways to make itself even less accountable than it already is, which is absurdly unaccountable. Clearly, there's a significant conflict of interest here. The investigations and trials that have happened to Trump should be happening on a mass scale across the government, left and right, Democrat and Republican alike. Instead, we seem to be going in the exact opposite direction because of outrage against what has happened to Trump. Or if you're a Trump supporter, maybe you think it's because the Department of Justice is corrupt. Well, that could be true too. Multiple things can be true simultaneously. Regardless, it's still the wrong direction. It's still handing more power to the government. It's still conducive to even more corruption. The answer to this problem was never to give immunity to politicians. That's ridiculous. That's the last thing we should be doing right now. Now, I know it may be cathartic to some Trump supporters, but the delicious cake they're eating has cyanide in it. The answer to corruption isn't immunity from being held liable for corruption. That's like saying the best way to stop someone from robbing your house is by giving them the key and telling them when you'll be on vacation. The fact that these justices and politicians and the people who support them think that politicians can't properly do their jobs without the ability to commit crimes without fear of consequence should tell you everything you need to know about them. Why do you want our politicians to be able to commit crimes? That should be an embarrassing admission. But instead, we have people actually openly arguing for it now. What's happening? What's happening? I'm not saying that America used to have it right and now we don't. No, America has always had problems with how it was run and how it treated people, citizens and non-citizens alike. Always. But those problems typically stemmed from a divergence of what America was supposed to be or what it claimed to be, and not because of an actual faithful adherence to our ideals of freedom and the pursuit of happiness. We can be better. I don't want to go back to the past. I want to move on to something better than what we are now. But right now, I see us moving in the wrong direction. I see that once again, religion is being used and abused as one of the primary tools to get that job done. Religion will stop being such a useful tool for the corrupt and the power-hungry when actual virtuous religious people finally stand up and refuse to allow their sacred beliefs to be used as a political tool. The time for that to happen is now.